Welcome to post Boston Science Fiction Film Festival interview. At the time that you're hearing this, the Boston Science Fiction Film Festival will have just been over, but you can still go and check out Lisa Downs' films on her site and social media, or take a look at the upcoming project that she's here to talk to us about. Thank you, Lisa, for coming on the show to talk to us about the Flight of the Navigator and the Never Ending Story documentaries that you have.
You are very welcome. I'm very excited to be sharing them with people.
All right, since this is a horror show, when are you going to do a horror documentary?
Well, I have to be fair, I have to give a shout out. Also at Boston, they're screening In Search of Darkness, which they've covered horror pretty well.
Yeah, I have those films as well. I think they're doing one of those on Friday. But again, we're playing this after the Sci-Fi Fest, so
Yeah, well, I do love horror. So maybe I'll pick one day, but not quite yet.
yeah, maybe do. I'm trying to think. What's a horror like
Well,
family
well,
friendly
I
movie
would
that hasn't been done yet? Like maybe The Gate.
well, I if I could have picked any to do, I would have picked Pet Cemetery, but that's already been covered by a documentary. So unfortunately, that was going to be my choice. But then my second choice would be Lost Boys, but that's like a holy grail.
Yeah, I think you could do The Lost Boys. I mean, all Warner Brothers has ever done is put out the same bonus features from DVD to Blu-ray to 4K. So there is a book out there
Exactly.
from the same people that, by the way, that did they
The
did
Pet
RoboDoc.
Cemetery.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, sort of after Pet Cemetery, but yeah, RoboDoc and the
Cults.
Hellraiser
Yeah,
documentary.
cult screenings. They did Fright Night as well.
Yeah, and they have a book out for the Lost Boys. The book was I had a copy of it, but it when it got shipped to me, it was like in pieces.
Oh no, because I had just spoken to them actually, and I had said I really want a copy of their Lost Boys book, and they don't even have a copy, so I don't know how to get my hands on one. It says sold out on their website.
Yeah, it is. I wish they really wish they could just continue printing that. You know what I mean? That'd be great. But yeah, the copy unfortunately I got them from them came in like it nearly it was split in two.
Oh, that's sad because it looks like such
Yeah.
a great book.
It was for what I got to read of it, but I digress. What was it about these two films? Flash Gordon's come out so long ago. We're really not going to touch upon that too much. And I am a fan of Flash Gordon, but I'm a bigger fan of the Never Ending Story and especially Flight of the Navigator, especially considering Disney has never given the Flight of the Navigator any kind of like accolades.
You know what? That's why I think I really love it too, is well, even more so, apart from the fact I grew up with it, is because it didn't have a sequel. And yes, there are rumblings, but is it really going to happen that there's a reimagining? I don't know.
I
But it
hope
doesn't
not.
have a sequel. I hope not as well. And it just feels like what I love about a lot of 80s films is that they didn't cash grab sequels or prequels or, create a universe out of it. It's just like standalone gem that a lot of people haven't heard of as well. So I really love talking to people who do love Flight of the Navigator. I think it's such a special film, and I think that the special effects still hold up today as well. A lot of what they did, they created for the film. So it was quite a groundbreaking film in that sense as well. But I was born in 82. I love these kind of films. I love my childhood. And these documentaries are a way to celebrate these films that so many people have a connection with.
The Flight of the Navigator, I have not had a chance to I saw part of it, but I'm definitely going to finish my watch of it when I obtain a Blu-ray from you. Was there anyone in Flight of the Navigator or Never Ending Story that you're not able to track down? Now, Never Ending Story is now currently in development, right? Because you finished your Kickstarter.
The Life After Neverending Story is as well. This is after Boston, but both of them are being screened. It's finished. So that Kickstarter it was already edited pretty much at that point. The
Oh, okay.
Kickstarter was just because I needed help with a lot of the costs that people don't realize goes into indie filmmaking. Like, yes, you have to make the film, but then it's like you need to pay for licenses, you need to pay for insurance, you need to pay for Blu-ray authoring, you need to pay for ratings and all these costs that happen once you've pressed export on the film. So that's what the Kickstarter was for. And I think, I was very proud that it was successful, but I think part of it was also people knew that it was going to happen. There was maybe like a 3-month wait for the Blu-ray as opposed to 3 years from Kickstarter. So both Life After the Navigator and Life After the Neverending Story will, by the time your audience hears this, have been screened back to back in Boston.
I really wish I could come to. I could have come to that on Thursday. That's gonna suck. But again, I'll
Also
enjoy.
here's another.
But like I said, I've seen half of the Navigator. A friend of mine had the Blu-ray, and we were watching it, and we unfortunately we had a power outage, and then we
Oh no.
yeah, so I never got to finish it, and I was just like,
Oh
oh well, I'll just go order myself a copy, and then one day, and then
yeah.
I was on
Well,
eBay,
that
and I saw it was a copy, and then I heard you were coming, I was just like, ah, I'll just get a copy from her.
it's meant to be. Well, that's it, because I'm interested when you do finally see it, because the last 15, 20 minutes are my favorite. So I'm keen
I
for you
probably
to
got
see it and
15
let
or
me
20
know.
minutes into it before I got cut off, but
Oh, well, there's
what
quite a journey for you to go on then when you see it.
but back to my question, what were some of the people you weren't able to track down for these films?
Yeah, so one of my biggest frustrations was that exactly. We had yeses for Wolfgang Peterson and Thilo Bruckner, who was obviously the director and the Nighthawk, respectively. Um, they said yes, and then borders shut, and we couldn't fly to Germany and the States. So sadly, that didn't happen. But in terms of not being able to track people down, most people I either track down and they say yes, or I track down and they politely say no. For Neverending Story, there was actually, of the bullies, there was one bully I couldn't track down, which was doing my head in. The other one, Chris Eastman, who's credited as Drum Garrett, was wonderful, and he's in the documentary. I interviewed him. And then there was the another bully who just acknowledged he was the bully and then stopped replying to my messages. So that was, I took it as a polite no. But I would have liked to have spoken to. In terms of Barrett Oliver, I always get asked by people who have seen the trailer, the teaser for the documentary, did Barrett Oliver get contacted? He was someone that I found a contact for, like a mutual friend, and through the friend, I had reached out to him for just even a coffee. But he's notoriously private, so I wasn't really expecting that. So he was probably someone that I would have loved to have had a response from, just so I knew that the request got through. For Navigator,
Wait,
Sarah, just sorry.
so the I guess one of the three main characters you weren't able to get.
Yeah, Bastian. I mean,
Ah,
people who know kind of his story, he famously left Hollywood. You hear stories about child actors. I can't even begin to imagine what he must have gone through for him to completely shut off Hollywood. So he's been living. I bought his book. He's a photographer and specializes in 19th century printing. Um, and I have his book on the Woodbury type of printer, which I know nothing about. But he lives in LA and he does exhibitions sometimes, and he's very, very private and doesn't do any interviews and doesn't really pop up anywhere. He's
ah.
one of those kind of enigmas that I would have loved to have spoken to. We do in the documentary talk about him, and there's also a reference to him now at the end, kind of where he is now in a video. But yeah, I wasn't expecting him to say yes, but so he would be probably the one that I would have loved to have met.
And then what about Flight of the Navigator? I'm assuming Sarah Jessica Parker be super huge, very difficult to reach.
Yeah, so I was very lucky with Flight of the Navigator. The director Randall Kleiser came on board as an EP, and he pretty much still knew everybody. I tracked down a couple of people who ended up being in it. The girl that played Jennifer, and then Albie Whitaker, who played his little brother. But Randall had Sarah Jessica Parker's PR contact. So on my behalf, reached out to her, but that was a polite decline. And also Paul Rubens, Pee Wee Herman. I was having email contact with and sending him clips about people talking about him. And, that again was a very polite decline. He
That's
was very
right,
lovely
because
on
he's the voice
email.
of the ship.
He is. So for Navigator, there wasn't anyone that I couldn't find. It was just people were not there, Sarah Jessica Parker and Paul Rubens were just not, it's not their bag. I don't even think Sarah Jessica Parker remembers being in the film, to be honest. She's done so much stuff since, and it was one of her first roles, if not the first role. And there was an interview once that I read where she was just saying she didn't even know what it was. She just got a yes for the role and then read some lines and then can't even remember what the film was about. So I wasn't really surprised there. But I'm pretty good at finding people. It's just trying to get people to say yes sometimes. You know, there's only so many pleads I can do.
When you're putting these kind of documentaries together, how do you figure out what the narration flow is going to be through the whole thing? I'm working on a documentary TV show about deceased comic book artists and writers, and I think every
Oh,
episode's going to
wow.
be different. Yeah, I know it's going to be. Someone's like, you do realize that will never like that will never end. There's like comic book artists and writers dying like every 5 minutes. We're
Oh,
hearing
no.
another one. And I'm like, I'm aware, I'm aware. Like we just lost Jose Delbo. He was an
Oh.
artist on Transformers for Marvel Comics for a number of years. He had like a 6 year run on Wonder Woman. He really defined like the look and the attitude of Wonder Woman pre-crisis. So before George Perez, who also passed away, took over the book, and things like that. And I'm like, I understand. I'm not going to get to everybody. Okay, I'm going to cherry pick who I love, and they'll get a TV episode.
Well, hey, at least it sounds like a never-ending show though for you. Excuse the pun.
Ah ha
You'll
ha.
always have someone to do. But I guess the hard thing is with documentaries, you never really know what the ending is going to be or how the story might unfold. So when I started Flash, and I won't keep on Flash for too much, but when I started Flash, it was just going to be a story about Sam, and I didn't even consider doing like a making of celebration of the film. And then when I found that model worked and wanted to replicate that through other films, Joey's story was such a unique story that was still unfolding when we were filming. So I met him when he was only 3 months out of prison. And we had been pen pals while he was in the correctional center.
Wait, who was
So
in prison? I'm sorry.
Joey Kramer.
Okay, and who did
So
he play?
Flight of the
I don't know all the actors with the
Oh,
characters. I'm
sorry,
sorry.
sorry. So the main kid from Flight of the Navigator, David, the one
He
that
was in
gets
prison? Wow.
well, so this when you finish the documentary, you'll hear his whole story. But he famously before the documentary, if you Googled Joey Kramer, Flight of the Navigator, his mugshot would really be the only thing that came up outside of anything to do with the film. Um, and this story, his story is so fascinating and heartbreaking, but inspiring about why he robbed the bank and his recovery since. So we became pen pals while he was still serving his sentence. And then we met. And so the documentary was shot over 3 years, and it was during his recovery and him trying to get back into acting and finally going back to Comic Cons and kind of getting on the right path. He had a lot of issues. He was homeless for a while. He was in kind of the throes of addiction. So with a story like that, we were watching him try and overcome these struggles. So we didn't know what was going to happen at the end. So I didn't know if he was going to relapse or if he was going to go back to jail or if he was going to be successful. And so there's certain elements to a documentary that you just don't know what the story is going to be. And then with Neverending Story, our narrative actually totally changed. We were going to go and do a cross-country road trip with Noah in the States to kind of he's had a thing with his back, and it symbolized this thing that he'd always wanted to do with a motorbike on his bucket list. Now his back had healed, and then lockdown happened, and then just so much stuff happened in the 2 years that we couldn't get to the States. We couldn't do that anymore. So then my whole narrative had to change again. And so uh, I have an idea of what I want it to be when I start. Obviously, the making of and the talking to cast and crew and the legacy element can have some structure to it from the beginning that can carry to the end. But in terms of the kind of personal narrative, I just don't know what the story is going to be until I kind of have all the footage and I'm playing with it in the edit.
When you how do you figure out the length? Because some people must have like incredibly long stories, but you have to keep under a certain time length. Well, how do you know what to cut?
So I'm a big fan of trying to keep it around 90 minutes because even though I know that there's so much stuff that I want to put in, I know that beyond 90 minutes, people might start getting like restless, and you still want it to be entertaining and it's still like a self-contained documentary. So the way I get around it is if there's something that I really want, but I know it doesn't fit in the main film, I just put it as a bonus feature on my Blu-ray. And that's a really great way for me to not be really precious about certain stories or certain clips because I know that people will be able to see them if they get the Blu-ray copy. So all is not lost. But it's hard. Flash was like an hour 50, I think, when I first did it, and I was like set that it was finished. And then I saw it a month later at a screening, and then that's when I realized that actually it was 20 minutes too long. So I went back into the edit and I cut it down. I had to redo the grade and the audio mix, and so after that, it's pretty much like I will aim for 90 minutes, and I'll just work out what doesn't work by just watching it over and over and seeing when I get distracted or when I feel like it's going a bit slow, and then I throw it as a bonus feature.
Um, I still remember the first time I saw Flight of the Navigator. I'm a bigger Navigator fan than I am the Neverending Story. I just picked up the Blu-ray for the Neverending Story, and listened to it, the film with Wolfgang's commentary through it.
Oh,
Um, and I am unfortunately reminded of the terrible, terrible legacy like comes after the movie, like the sequels, the cartoon, the TV show. Just nothing has ever been good.
no.
Nothing is good at all.
I
It's
think
just
a lot of
it's
people like to feel like there aren't two more never-ending stories. Like there's one film, there was no second part, there was no third part, there was no TV, like there's just one. So
yeah.
I don't consider two and three existing. Although we do talk about the third one in the documentary because I interviewed Jason James Richter, who played Bastian in the third one, also famously from Free Willy. But he was a really great interview to talk about that, but also child actors.
Did you interview the Flash actor? He was the father in the second one.
He, I
John Wesley
tried,
Shipp. Yeah, John
I
Wesley Shipp.
tried because I am a 90s teen and he was Dawson's dad in Dawson's
That's right.
Creek. So I was like, if I can try and meet John Wesley Shipp from Dawson's Creek, then I will be very happy. But sometimes it's hard, trying to get hold of people. There's so many different ways, and if the only person I have as a contact is their agent or manager, I know that the chances are very slim of probably getting a response. And that was his case. But I was like waving my Dawson's Creek flag trying to get that interview, not really needing it in the documentary. I just wanted to interview him.
Trust me, I understand that completely. Doug Jones, I wanted him on my show many years ago, and his agent like completely like manager whatever like turned me down like hardcore. And I was talking to Doug at a convention, and that got brought up, and he was just like, "No, I do interviews all the time. Who said that to you?"
That's the hard thing.
And
You
he was
you
like, I
know
was
that
like,
there are
"You're this guy,"
gatekeepers.
and he was just, I showed him the email, and he was just like, "Oh, well, I'm gonna have to talk about that when I get out the car. Here's my business card. That's my personal home phone number on it. You call me on
Yeah.
Monday." I wish I had kept that freaking card and kept in contact
Oh,
with him
that's
because of
why
how much bigger Doug Jones kept getting. But I
oh
didn't.
no.
I did it. Damn it.
I never take it personal if I don't hear from agents or managers because you know that they're just the biggest gatekeeper. And we were actually at a Comic-Con
Ugh.
and Ray Park was there and we were trying to get an interview about Flash Gordon. And I was actually there talking to him and he was saying, "Yes, I will do an interview with you now on camera." And his manager next to him was saying, "No, he doesn't want to do it." And Ray is literally standing there in front of both of us saying, "No, I really would love to talk about Flash Gordon. I love that film. I'm going to do the interview." And so it was really interesting to see the manager in like gatekeeper mode, even when Ray is literally standing there. So it is, yeah, that's one of the toughest ones is trying to find ways other than the agent or manager to get a hold of people. Because when you speak to the actual person, you're like, oh, you're not ignoring me. You're actually really lovely and you really want to be involved. But I just wouldn't have known that.
Um. Yeah, I know. I get exactly what you're saying. I'm running up to that right now with the TV show I'm working on. Comic book people a little easier sometimes. Once in a while you land it with somebody like, "Oh, he's never gonna freaking talk to me." This guy produces every Hollywood Batman production ever, and he was the producer of 1989's Batman. And I got Michael Uslan to be part of the documentary.
You can never assume that people are too big to be on a podcast or a radio show or in a
Right, right.
documentary. Never
I
ever
mean, this guy
assume
has
because
produced
yeah,
Batman, everything.
yeah. I had that. We managed to grab Stan Lee for 30 seconds. And I was like, Stan Lee's never gonna say yes. And off he like off his chair and he was like, "Well, how can I help?" And he was like the sweetest person.
Have you announced yet what's happening next after Flight of the Navigator? I'm sorry, after
Uh
Running Story. Sorry.
That's okay. I have. They're slightly veering away from the 80s. We will be back doing 80s films afterwards, but the next one we're halfway shooting is Goodfellas, Life After Goodfellas.
Oh, neat.
Um,
Okay, so
yeah,
not a family friendly film because
it's
Flash,
not
Gordon, Navigator, and Neverending Story are all pretty much family friendly to a degree, and but
to a
Goodfellas, absolutely
degree.
not.
No. So Goodfellas and then actually Grease, because Flight, you probably would have seen this in the first 20 minutes of the documentary. Flight of the Navigator was directed by Randall Kleiser, who also directed Grease. So that's a slight foray into the late 70s. But I'm really excited about that one. And then after that, there's a couple in the works which are back to 80s family friendly, but I can't announce yet. So Goodfellas and Grease are the next two.
I just found out there's a Clue documentary.
I had read that and I didn't go beyond one article, but I did read that.
Yeah, it's on
But I
Prime right
don't know
now.
much. Is it actually out?
It's out. Yeah, it's they how about this? They interviewed more people from the film than the Blu-ray from Shout Factory that just recently came out, which only had like two interviews on it, and that's it. No commentary. Oh, I was like, guys, I'm so happy this got a 4K treatment, but this is such a lackluster release. There are plenty of people from this film still alive. Was this being produced during the pandemic? I don't. It was such a disappointing release, and both interviews are really short. I was just kind of like, I do not expect this kind of material from Shout or Scream Factory. Usually, I'm usually expecting so much more. Like
Yeah.
they just put out the collector's edition of both Conan movies, and there is like tons of new interviews added into those besides all the old material left over from previous releases like with Arnold and things like that. So
Well, they've just also announced that they're doing the 4K re-release of Dark Crystal and Labyrinth as well. And I saw a list of bonus features that I think they're also releasing on streaming. And it was okay. It was like trailers and some behind the scenes stuff that's already been out, a couple of new interviews, but I didn't see anything kind of in depth, but I could be wrong. I've only kind of scanned the list. But I think that's why I really like to put as much as I can on bonus features, like at least 70 minutes worth, because I just think it's such a fun part of having a Blu-ray or a physical media. It's an experience in itself. So it is disappointing when you get a release and there's not really much bonus features on there. I hear you
yeah,
on
and
that
I don't
one.
know what's happening behind the scenes. I'm not 100% criticizing Shout Factory and Scream Factory or whatever the parent company is.
Well, that's,
Um,
yeah,
I get it. I'm not, and especially considering I know some of the people who work on those Blu-rays. Like Sean Clark, he does an incredible job with Horrors and Howl on the
mm,
Ground, where he goes to locations of these horror movies,
yeah.
and it shows you where like okay, and so in this scene where Tom Atkins was talking to this guy, this is where that was filmed, and so on and so forth. That's really cool. And I kind of did one myself when before here in the States, Beetlejuice 2 was filming prior to the strike, and then it has completed, and obviously it's coming out this October now. But about four
Yes.
years ago, during the pandemic, I got so bored. I got a friend of mine who I know had been isolated enough herself, and we said, "Why don't we go check out the locations of like Beetlejuice, where it was filmed up in Vermont, because there's no traffic and we got nothing to do." And she's like, "Sure." So we drove 2.5 hours up to the area in Vermont where they filmed Beetlejuice, and we found all the locations. And in
That
fact,
would have
we
been
just
amazing.
recently reused those for Beetlejuice 2.
Did they rebuild the house?
They did. In fact,
Was that
they
they had
all of the
to?
exterior stuff, they went back to the same town in Vermont that acts as a town in Connecticut. I don't know why they didn't just
Oh,
film
I'm
in Connecticut.
excited to
Maybe it's
that.
cheaper to film in Vermont. I don't know. It's so funny that they filmed in Vermont for a fictitious town in Connecticut when they could have just filmed in Connecticut. I don't get it.
It could just be like tax breaks or something really boring that we don't know about.
Yeah, it's just
But I'm
so
really
funny to think
excited
about.
about. And also, there's been a Beetlejuice documentary in the works for a while now.
Yeah,
Um,
for a
but I
long
don't
time. That's been
a
in kind of
long
development hell
time.
as much as RoboDoc has, but RoboDoc
I
obviously had
know.
a lot of reasons why it was in development hell besides the pandemic. They were holding out forever for Peter Weller and they finally got him, and now it's become like a TV series because there's the RoboDoc, the first disc and the first season's out about RoboCop. The second one's gonna be about RoboCop 2. The third one's gonna be about RoboCop
Yeah.
3 and the TV show, plus Prime Directive, which was the made for TV stuff, and they're going to also include stuff about the cartoons and video games and comic books on the third film. Third.
And I really enjoyed it. And I had seen RoboCop maybe like once years ago. So I knew of it, but I didn't really know it. And I watched their series and like the end of every episode, I just thought put on the next one, put on the next one, put on the next one. Like I thought they did such a good job, and it was so fascinating that I'm excited to see their second one.
Yeah, me
And
too.
I look forward to the Beetlejuice one when it does come out,
The
whenever
only
it
thing I
comes.
had a problem with the RoboCop documentary, and I will reach out to Chris, who is the producer of it. He's been on my show a few times, or maybe I'll just have him on to talk about it. Was like, why was there nobody from the families of the old man, the desk sergeant, or there's a couple other actors who have passed away. It's just like, how come we didn't get anything about them in the documentary? Like nobody talks about them. I just thought that was kind of strange.
Unless, I mean, that would be interesting. You should ask them. I mean, I guess either they thought that they had so much already, or maybe that they interviewed people about them and it just didn't fit. I mean, they've
Maybe.
crammed quite a lot in.
Maybe like in the Hellraiser documentary Leviathan, they interview every freaking person on the planet Earth connected to the first couple films, except for Ashley
Yes.
Lawrence, because apparently she had the flu. But by the time she was finally ready to be able to do anything, they were already in the cut and development stage of it all. They needed to get the thing out because they were already behind, way behind. And she
Oh,
was like,
that's
"Oh, I
sad.
got so much to say." And they're like, "Oh, where were you like 2 years ago, lady?"
See, when you watch these are all the stories that when you watch something and you have questions, like you just don't know what goes into a documentary. So, it would be so easy to be like, why didn't you get that lady from Hellraiser in? But,
Right. Well,
you
why don't
almost
you
need
plug?
a disclaimer at the beginning of every documentary going, I tried to get this person. I really tried to get this person. I did ask them this, and then this is why it took so long to release.
Well, Lisa, why don't you plug where people can find you to obtain one of your documentaries?
Lifeaftermovies.com is my website. You can get the Blu-rays on there. They're region free. I ship worldwide. They're also on Amazon and eBay. If you see them on there, that's me as well.
Oh, good. Okay.
Um, yeah. So lifeaftermovies.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Lisa. I really appreciate it. I've been a fan of your work, and I look forward to what you have coming next.
And I look forward to meeting you in Boston.